Greetings everyone, and welcome back to Lucas Brews. In this video, and probably the following video, we'll be looking at some 1/72nd scale BF109 kits. So there's a fair few on the market, and this isn't all of them, this is just some of them. And I'll be having a little look at them and comparing them, similar to what I did with the AZ and the airfix Spitfire video I did not too long ago. So I'll start off with the two older kits of the four that I looked at, which is the Italeri and the Academy BF109Gs. And in the next video, I'll be having a look at the airfix and zvezda BF109. If you're interested in buying any of these kits, I'll leave a link in the description to Tectonic Hobbies where you can buy them, or contact us to order them in if they're not available. And I'll also leave a link to my Patreon, so if you want to support my videos and have a look at some of my exclusive content, go check that out. But otherwise, enough of that, and let's actually look at these kits. So these are the four BF109 kits we'll be having a little look at today. The BF109 G6 by Academy, the Italeri BF109 G6, the Zvezda BF109 F2, which is a slightly different version of the 109. The G model, I believe, had a more powerful engine, and the armament was also beefed up to take out more air targets, especially the bombers. And last of all, the most recent re-release, the airfix Messerschmitt BF109 G6. So, we'll start off by having a look at the oldest first, which is the Italeri kit. It was originally new tooling in 1995, and this was reboxed in 2010. Although previously it had a few tiny little iterations where it had some new decals and some new parts to make it the G6. It retails for around about the $20 mark, so it's about the cheaper kind of end of the 1/72nd scale stuff. So originally this would have all been in a plastic bag, but I have since taken it out and given it a wash because I got this one a little while ago and was planning on building it up at some point. So we'll set this stuff aside and have a quick look at the box first. Starting out on the cover, we have a BF109 G6, obviously, and it's kind of pulling away from a B25 Mitchell. Obviously, you've got the usual branding for Italeri, the note for what decals you have, figure not included, which is a bit of a shame, I think. And yeah, so some very lovely box art there. Then you've got a little map of the sprues, which I think is really handy. It gives you a good idea on how the kit goes together, and that can kind of tell you whether or not it will suit what you're wanting to achieve. You've got your decals there, which is also really good because you can figure out what scheme is in the box. Then on the back, we've got a basic painting scheme for just one of them, which is a little bit weird, I think, but it's interesting to have something on the back of the box. Got a little bit of history on this side of the box in a few different languages, and then you've just got the box art repeated on the side there. So now we'll have a little look at the instructions. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Italeri's instruction style, because they tend to be fold out, and it's really hard if you've got a narrow workbench or like not much space to actually look through stuff. You can just fold the book over, so it's kind of a minor point, but it's still something I prefer, instructions in a booklet form, but that's all good. So we've got a bit more history on the aircraft and some technical data. That's all very well and good. Nice to know a little bit more about what you're doing. Then you've got a usual sprue map, and they'll tell you which parts you don't actually need, which in this case looks just like a radiator. Then you've got a guide, so they're using the Model Master colors on this guide. So you'll have to convert that one if you're not using them. And here you can see the instructions fold out like this. So assembly starts with the cockpit, which is pretty standard. Interestingly, they tend to simplify the detail a little bit in the instructions, which is pretty rare. Usually the top-end stuff, or like other model kit companies, will over-detail the instructions, and sometimes it's a little disappointing, I think, to look at the plastic and you're like, oh, in the instructions it looks so much better. But rest assured, you will not have that problem with Italeri. It's just a vague kind of shape of the object that you're gluing together, just so you know which object is which. But the details will be a little bit nicer than they appear in the instructions usually. So yeah, as I said, assembly begins with the cockpit, attaching the spinner. The tailpiece comes in a separate section that you then put into the fuselage, if that makes any sense. Separate rudder, so you could pose the rudder, which is a nice little feature. Elevators, however, you can't. They're fixed as one piece. If you wanted to put an engine in one of these models, the Italeri wouldn't be too bad a choice to pick, because you could change these so that the cowlings are open since they're separate pieces in this model that you attach onto the fuselage later. You've got your wings here, a few different options for extra pieces to make cannons, and option to drill out holes to put in things like bomb racks, fuel tanks, that sort of thing. And it looks like you chop off some of the cannons on this, so I think it'll really depend on what version of the 109 you're doing, but it's nice that they've got a few little options there. Sticking the aircraft together, so all good there. The canopy comes in 3 sections, which I'm a big fan of, because that means that you can have the canopy open if you wish, or in my videos I did a little stop motion with a few 109s, and one of them was actually the Italeri kit. You'll see that I actually animate it so that the pilots are opening and closing the canopy, so that's a feature I'm a big fan of, and I know a lot of diorama people really like to have aircraft on the ground, so it's nice to be able to open up the canopy for that. Optional armoured plating. I know a lot of pilots talk about taking that out because it restricted visibility, but it's an option if you wish to build it in this kit. You're attaching the propeller blades here to the spinner. The propeller blades come separately, which I think can be a little bit of a pain because you've got to be very careful to not break the prop while you're gluing it together, and it's also a bit tricky to actually line them up so they're perfectly straight, and the position of the blades relative to each other is actually accurate. They're not in an awkward angle, which you will definitely notice later on. So that's not a big fan of the way that's done. Optional sand filter for the air intake, which is nice. Then you've just got the landing gear and a few other little pieces, the optional cannons and bombs on the bottom. And then if we turn over here, we've got the decal options. So we've got common stencils detailed on this little page, which is nice. Good to keep them separate sometimes. It helps when you're trying to figure out where everything goes, I think. And we've got a few different versions. So we've got one from JG27 in Greece, 1944. So that is the one on the cover. The colour guides for Italeri are in black and white, which I'm not a huge fan of that. It's a bit tricky to see which colour's which. They do try to use different kind of patterns to indicate which colour is which, but I think you also don't really get a good idea on what it actually looks like. So I personally prefer it when you've got the actual colours, but I know some people might not be bothered by that. But then you've just got your decal placement, so that's a pretty generic scheme, so it's got the usual RLM colours. Here we have the one that was featured on the back, and as you can see in the back art, which is thankfully in colour, you'll notice that the entire aircraft has been painted those green and brown colours, and then it's kind of been stippled almost with the grey colour, whereas on the instructions it shows that same scheme, but this time, like, it's not the entire aircraft, hasn't been painted green and brown, there's no kind of stippling on it, it's just the upper surfaces that have been painted that colour. So a little bit different, and the spinner is also painted flat black, I believe, but it was green in the other one. So a little bit different, don't know which one's more accurate, but this is the one I did when I previously did an Italeri 109 G6. And then we have one from the Finnish Air Force, and this one's actually post-World War II, you can tell because it's got the circular roundels rather than the other symbol that I won't mention. So that's interesting that you get a little bit of a view into the checkered service history of the G model, but otherwise it's a pretty standard RLM colour scheme, so it's just the usual German greyish colours. And that's the same with this one, which is the Swiss Air Force. So this one's during World War II, so I'd imagine this one would have been impounded or something like that. Usually the Swiss get their aircraft that way during World War II, which is very interesting. So yeah, it's cool to see they've been represented in this one. And yeah, a little bit of a nice marking scheme there for all the red. I'm sure that will be very eye-catching. So it'll be a bit difficult to decide which scheme I do. I'm probably going to do a different one, like borrow the decals from possibly the airfix kit, just to do something a little bit different. But big fan of the options in this kit in terms of the decals. And the instructions are not too bad, they're relatively clear. However, I would prefer them if they're a booklet, because it's a bit easier to have on the workbench, but you can always fold over and adjust it so that you're on the page that you want to see and not take up too much space. So, let's have a little look at the actual sprues in this model kit. So, I'll start off with frame number B. So, as you can see, all of the surface detail is sunken, so there's no old school raised details. Some nice texturing on the fabric control surfaces there. I quite like how they've done that. Overall, the mold is pretty clean. There's a few tiny bits of flashing and a few kind of weird looking holes here and there. But it's really, really subtle. Like you can kind of see a little bit just where my finger is. There's a tiny bit of flashing kind of on the edges of the wing there. But otherwise, not looking too shabby at all. So in this one, you've got your underside of the wings, you've got your upper side, and if you have a look, you've got a little bit of raised structures for like ribbing for the inside of the landing gear. So I'll have a little look at my 109 references before I make a bit of a judgment about how realistic this one looks. But otherwise, the Muri looks like it's pretty well molded, and everything looks like it's relatively easy enough to cut off the sprues, so nothing too bad there, and nothing's fallen off, which is always a positive. And yeah, it looks like they've got some nice little details here and there. There's a few pin markings on the landing gear on the inside, but they're probably not going to be as noticeable, so it's good they've placed all of the pin markings where you won't see them. Same with the underside of the wings, you're going to less likely to see it when it's all there, so that's good, nothing bad in any obvious places. Have a look at this sprue, which has a lot of the smaller details as well as the actual fuselages. So as you can see, the fuselage is quite thin and a little bit delicate there. The detail is relatively minimal in the cockpit, like you've just got a basic piece of molded plastic for the rudder pedals and all that, but it's nice they had some subtle details there. The instrument panel is all raised details, but there's no kind of sunken detail, so you're probably better off using decals. We'll have to double check whether this has decals. I don't think all of the Italeri ones do. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit tricky to paint. The molding on the landing gear looks a bit weird. It's a bit hard to see, but it looks like the plastic is kind of sunken where the hubcaps are and kind of warped, which looks a little bit weird. I don't think that's 100% accurate, but oh well. Surface detail is, I wouldn't say it's outstanding, there's no rivet marks or anything, but it's still not too bad at all. And the cowling frame parts are looking all good there. A little bit of flashing on the propellers on the edges of the blades there, so that'll take a little bit of time to neaten up. And the landing gear struts look okay. Then if we turn over this, we can see some, not outstanding, but some basic kind of surface detail for the interior walls of the cockpit. So it's not great and it doesn't look super accurate, it's pretty simplified, just a bunch of circles, no kind of wires or any ribbing or that kind of stuff. The seat is pretty basic as well, however there is, I don't know if you can see it, but they have tried to mold in seat belts, but I would say you'd be better off using some masking tape, or if you've got some decals for seat belts, to switch them out for that. And then you got your clear parts, which are, as I said, 3-piece canopy, so that's pretty good. The clear parts look pretty decent in terms of their transparency and a little bit of shine, so I haven't really got any major issues with that. There's no major distortion or anything, so they look pretty good and not too thick. Moving on to the decals, so you've got some common stencils here. Usually the Italeri decals aren't too bad. I'll turn that around the right way. Might be a little bit tricky to see, but overall they've got some nice detail there. And yeah, hopefully these ones don't silver too much. Usually the Italeri ones are okay. So you've got your German markings there. This one's for the Greek one and this is for the late war one. Finnish markings and the Swiss ones. So that's all very well and good. And I wouldn't say it's quite to the standard of cartograph. They can get some very fine stuff, but overall these are not too bad at all. Sadly, no instrument panels, so you're going to have to paint it by hand. So overall, considering the age of this kit, what you get is pretty good. It's very cheap, so you're not going to end up losing too much money into this. I would say it's definitely not too bad for beginners. There are a few very fiddly assemblies, such as the propeller, that might be a little bit hard for some people just starting out. As for detailers, the detail in this aircraft's pretty minimal, so out of the box you're not going to get like a super impressive kit. But I think the Italeri one holds a lot of promise in terms of what you could do. You could easily sand down the sidewalls and put in photo etch. You could easily open up the front cowling there and have engine detail on the inside, and you've got posable parts for the rudder and the cockpit. So it looks like for the price it wouldn't be too bad of a kit to grab and detail up, which is probably what I'll be doing with this. I might add a few extra little details here and there, but let's move on and see how the rest of the competition stacks up. The next oldest in the lineup would be the Academy kit, which is new tool in 1999, and this one was reboxed relatively recently as well. It also comes in around about the same price tag of about $22 to $20, so the low 20s there, so not too bad for 72nd scale. It definitely won't break the bank. So we'll start off by having a little look at the box. This one's got some nice art, just two BF109s flying along with a rather amusing title on the art on the side of the aircraft. So white band stripe there, so I think that's also the Mediterranean theatre, just like the previous one. In fact, I think that might be the same squadron, 9 and 1, that might be similar, if not they were in the same region. Then on the side here, you've got a few little artworks of the actual finished aircraft, might be one of their prototypes. So it's good to see what it kind of looks like when it's finally assembled by someone. Then just some more art on the side, exactly the same as previous. And then all of your warnings and stuff just there. On the back here, absolutely nothing but cardboard. So, just picked this one up from the hobby store here, so I'll have to open up all the stuff, just bear with me and then we'll have a little look. So, out of the box, this is what you get. This time it is 3 plastic sprues, unlike the Italeris 2, as well as the clear parts. So, we'll dive into those, but we'll first start off with the instructions. So first thing to notice is you get about 50 different pamphlets, and they're all saying things like be careful, read the instructions, so fair few warnings there. Check parts list before unsealing, replace and return not guaranteed when plastic is unsealed, so a little bit of advice there. And then a little guide to doing the decals, so all of this is very good for beginners. I kind of brushed this aside because I've done it a little bit. This one is in the same kind of fold-out style as the Italeri one, so there's a few similarities with this kit. On the front here, you've got the another set of warnings, then the guide to the key for the instructions. So we'll open it up, and it starts with building the cockpit. So again, it's quite kind of basic, just a floor and a seat and a joystick there. We've got a control panel here, no decals again, like the Italeri one, so that can be a bit of a pain if you're new, and we'll have to have a little look at what the actual plastic's like, because I think these instructions are a little bit simplified too. One piece of extra part to put in on the sidewalls, one of the trim wheels, and otherwise that's kind of it. I think there's a little bit of surface detail on the inside, but we'll have to have a proper look. Instructions aren't super clear, I don't think, in terms of what colours to use. It's a little bit hard to see, but oh well. So gluing the air intake together. Once again, the tail is a separate piece. Part of the cowling on the top, but only the upper section with the machine guns. So much more difficult to open up the engine bay than the Italeri one, but oh well. Again, option for sand filter, which looks quite nicely molded. Assembling the elevators and putting them to the tail, and then attaching that to the rest of the aircraft. In this kit, the propeller spins and its assembly is pretty much identical to the Italeri one, except it's a lot easier because the propeller is all in one piece there. Similar thing with drilling the holes in, putting the wings together. Then we've got the landing gear. So I've built the Academy kit before, and from memory, the landing gear, the molding on the actual wheels and the tire tread is way too pronounced. It doesn't look anything like the actual tire. It looks a bit ridiculous. But that's easy enough fixed with a little bit of filler or a bit of sanding here and there. Otherwise, landing gear goes together, slap that on, a few small accessories. Then we turn around over here, so a little bit annoying with this layout, but oh well. Again, the canopy has the option of being open and closed with the added armor panel. A couple of other little parts. You've got options for fuel tanks and cannons, just like the Italeri one. And then you've got your schemes. Here we go. So this one includes one from JG53. So that one's flying in Sicily, so that's the one on the box. Then you have the same scheme from Greece. I think it's exactly the same. Let's have a little look. So JG27 Greece, 1944. So both of these kits include the exact same scheme for Greece, although in the Academy instructions, it suggests some mottling is present over the roundels on the wings and also along the fuselage side, whereas the Italeri one just suggests it's all nice and clean. However, there is one final scheme on the other side of this tiny little pamphlet, and that is for JG52. So that is, I believe, from the eastern front. 61 should be yellow. If it's got a yellow band, that's generally how you tell. I actually don't know what color code this thing's using for the paints. Oh, here we go. Yeah, not sure what brand it's using. Possibly Model Master again. But anyway, so you match that little triangle, which in this case it is 61. Oh, okay, no, sorry, 61's a decal. So that's the yellow band, so yep, that would be from the eastern front. So got a little bit of variety, although in general these are all the same kind of grey colours with variations mainly in the mottling. Maybe a few extra touches here and there, like I think this has got some actual lighter colours on the top. So that's pretty nice. A few different schemes there, nice to have three. You don't always get three in 1/72 scale kits like this. So that's nice. We'll have a look at the decals after we've looked at the actual plastic. And we'll start off with frame A. So the frames are pretty easily labelled. The moulding is very clean. There's very little flash on this. Definitely a lot less than the Italeri one, if any. Couple little tiny options here for the cowling top. Propeller is all one piece, so that's all nice. And surface detail is relatively sparse. It's all sunken details, but they're very shallow. I think I had a problem when I was doing this one originally, where the sunken details were so shallow it was actually difficult not to actually paint over them. So got to keep your paint coats very thin if you want any surface detail on this. And it definitely will need a little bit of pre-shading or highlighting if you want to make them pop a little bit. Same deal with the Italeri one, very basic interior. However, this one looks a little bit more accurate in terms of what's there. You'll obviously have your trim wheel added on, but again, super basic. There should be things like throttle quadrants on that side, and there should be the oxygen tank system there. So not super accurate and very sparse detail. A lot of injection marks, but they're all in hidden places, so nicely laid out there. Not much fabric texturing. In fact, there's basically nothing. It's kind of just raised detail. And a few little rivets on the tailpiece, but otherwise nothing too special and nothing really to write home about. I think the Italeri one did a little bit of a better job with replicating that fabric surface. This sprue's got a lot of the smaller parts, especially for the cockpit and also the upper part of the wings. So a nice little fuel tank there. The seat, again, it's super basic, not even any seat belts in this one, but that's okay. You can always upgrade that a little bit later. Super basic floor there, just nothing too fancy. Again, you've got a instrument panel that has no decals and it's all raised detail to paint. However, it's a bit hard to see on this with this camera, I think, but there is actually some raised details showing things like the instrument gauges and the needles and all that, so that'll be a lot easier to paint up and make look nice. Compared to the Italeri one, which was just a simple surf. They've got a little bit of fabric covering on part of the wheel, which is nice. The interior of the landing gear, which I think might be a little bit too small. However, the surface detail on it is nice. I think it's a little bit better than the Italeri one. And again, all of the injection markings are all quite hidden, so that's very good. And now have a little look at the underside of the wing here. So there's some actual rivets, which is not too bad. Again, the surface detail is very shallow, so might have to do a lot of highlighting to get it to pop. But it's I think it's a little bit better detail than the Italeri one, definitely on the underside here. However, the fabric's not as good, and yeah, it's a little bit shallow. Landing gear looks okay. The hubcaps look a lot better than the Italeri ones, but the tyres have really an unusually visible tread line, so might need to soften that a little bit to get it more accurate. Surface details okay on the elevators. Again, the fabric is not as well replicated as it could have been. Otherwise, these small parts look pretty good. There's only a tiny bit of flash on some parts, but really it's nothing too much. Only a little bit of cleanup required, which is pretty good. And now we'll have a little look at the decals. So the Academy ones, I believe, are also printed by Cartograph. I know some of their tanks have Cartograph decals in 35th scale because they've done a thing with Airfix where they're partnered on that. I don't remember having any issues really with the Academy decals. Pretty happy with these decals. They look like they're going to be really good. Not sure if I'm going to use, when I build this kit, I'm probably going to do the Eastern Front version, just because I've already done the the Greek theatre schemes. So that's probably what I'll end up doing with this kit. But yeah, not too shabby. Thank you very much for having a little watch of this video. I hope you got something out of it. I've finished the Italeri and the Academy kits, so there will be a video coming pretty soon, just in the process of recording all the audio and doing the last little edits of them. So that'll be coming, and obviously the next video will be looking at the airfix and zvezda kits, so stay tuned for that, and until the next one, model on.